All right, real excited to talk to my next guest on the Sports Card Shop guest line. He is probably the preeminent mantle collector in the country, if not the world. And happy to have mine. He's also an author. We're going to talk about that as well as his collection. Mr. Stephen Lane, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, John. It's a pleasure to be on.
Oh, thank you. I know I know you're retired, but you're busy and doing all sorts of fun stuff. So I mean, would you agree with that? Would you, I know we tend to be modest and stuff. Would being the preeminent mantle collector? I know there's some amazing collections out there, but some of the pieces that you own are obviously one of a kind. So it's would you agree with that opening statement?
Yeah, I look. I've been very lucky over the last 65 or so years that I've been collecting. To have been given the opportunity to own one of a kind mantle items that basically trace his life from when he was a young child all the way through his death. I know that there are a lot of people that collect mantle items, and some have items that might be more valuable than mine, like the $12.6 million 1952 Topps card. But I'm not aware of anyone who's been able to, over the last 65 or so years, basically trace Mantle's life through memorabilia, which is what I did in my book.
Yeah, and it's an excellent book. You were nice enough to sign one and send me it to read, which I did. I'm going to hold it up here for those that are watching on video form. It's called Mickey Mantle: A Life in Memorabilia, the Stephen Lane collection, and it really highlights Mantle's obviously life and career, but also, like you just said, you're collecting some of those mementos, collectibles, and things from his personal life, and just some amazing pieces. What uh, other than the obvious reasons, right? Wanting to share kind of your collection and your love of Mickey. What prompted you to write the book?
Well, what happened was, if you recall, when COVID hit and everybody was stuck at home, you couldn't travel, you couldn't be around people, you couldn't go out to eat, you couldn't get on an airplane, and everybody started delving into their collections or finding their collections that they didn't even know they had or remember in their attic. And because I have several rooms full of Yankee and Mantle items, and I was trying to figure out what to do with it. And somebody suggested to me, well, you ought to do a book on your memorabilia collection. And that's what I did during COVID. And it took me about a year and a half to figure out which items I was going to use, and then find a photographer, and then take each piece and do good photography with it, as this particular photographer did, and then put it in chronological order, and then write the actual copy of the book and write the book and get it into a position that it could be published. And that's how it came about, is all due to COVID. And eventually, like most people, when you get to be around my age, unless you have children who want your collection, you got to figure out what to do with them. So now I've put it in a book. And basically, this book, the way I wrote it, I wanted it to be a museum in a book. You could literally go through this book as if you were going through a museum and seeing once in a lifetime pieces that you can't find anyplace else. I mean, you could see 1952 Topps baseball cards at a baseball card show, but the items that I have, you can't see unless you break into my house, and I don't shoot you.
Yeah, don't try that, and leave the collection alone just for your safety. But I got to tell you, the books. You don't need me to tell you this, but I will tell you that the book is just well put together. It's in chronological, in a sense, order for years. I love how page 61 even deals with the 61 season that were any historical baseball fan. You don't have to be a Yankee fan. the significance of that year and the home run chase with Maris and Mantle. Maris at the time breaking the single season home run record. I gotta imagine that was laid out like that, like systematic. Like that wasn't by accident.
Right, but the problem was that when you do a book like this, you got to draft it, you got to redraft it. I mean, I went through dozens of drafts and redrafts, taking out pictures, putting in pictures. I had the book edited on several occasions, and believe me, it was difficult keeping the 1961 home run race on page 61. But I was able to do it.
Yeah, it was. I got to ask: is this your first foray into authoring a book, or have you written one a different kind of book?
Well, I'm a retired attorney, and I practiced for 45 years. And during that time, I did write books on the law, so I had some experience in terms of books. But this is a completely different animal, and I wanted to make sure that it was done in a way that it would be enjoyed by the most fervent Mantle fan or baseball fan or Yankee fan. And so what I did at the outset, before I published it, when I was just outlining it, I passed it by Bob Costas, who is renowned as one of the great Yankee fans, and he knew Mickey very well. And I passed it by both of Mantle's surviving sons, David and Danny. And if David and Danny had said they didn't like the book, they didn't want it published, I wouldn't have done it. But they loved the book. Bob Costas loved the book. And once they told me that they enjoyed reading what I had sent them, I knew I was on the right track, that other people who were either baseball fans or Yankee fans, or in particular Mickey Mantle fans, would enjoy the book.
Yeah, excellent. Obviously, just telling the story too. I gathered from the book that you have some background. You and your family have some background with the Mantle family as well. So this is not just necessarily Mickey Mantle, great baseball player. Obviously, that's a huge part of it. But there is a relationship. I know you attended like his fantasy camp, but even prior to that, if you can speak to the Lane family and the Mantle family, the connection there.
Yeah. Well, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. And at the time that I was about 6 years old, my dad introduced me to baseball, which was 1961. I was 6 years old. Well, at that time, for those who aren't old enough to remember, that was the first time New York only had one baseball team going back to the 1880s. They always had the New York Giants, the Brooklyn Dodgers, and or the New York Yankees. Well, the Dodgers and the Giants left in the late 50s. So by the time it was time for me to become a baseball fan, there was only one team. And not only was there only one team, they were the champions in 1961, and you had the Mantle-Maris home run race. So it was even more exciting, picking up the newspaper every day and reading what was going on. So I was a hooked Yankee fan from day one. And of course, it continues to the present date. And over time, after I graduated from law school, I was living in New Orleans. That's where I went to law school. And I became friends with a gentleman. He just passed away, actually, last week, Judge Eddie Saper, who was Billy Martin's attorney and agent, and was the individual who helped negotiate all of Billy's contracts with the Yankees and go through those turbulent times in the 70s and the 80s when he was getting hired and fired and hired and fired. And so he would hook me up with other individuals, including Billy Martin Jr. and David and Danny Mantle. And so through Judge Saper and then Billy Martin Jr. and then becoming friends with the Mantle brothers, that's how the book came about. In terms of the fantasy camp, what happened there was, again, if you're not old enough to recall, in the early 1980s, Commissioner Bowie Kuhn kicked Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays out of baseball because they were working as greeters at casinos. Well, in March of 1985, when the new commissioner, Peter Ubroth, came in, he decided to let Mantle and Mays back into baseball. And again, if you're old enough, you'll remember a specific Sports Illustrated issue that had Ubroth, Mantle, and Mays on the cover when they came back in March. At that time, in March, I turned 30. And at that same time, a gentleman by the name of Max Shapiro started the very first baseball fantasy camp, and he was going to do it in May of 1985, and I was going to be allowed in as the youngest member. You had to be 30 years old. If it happened a few months earlier, I wouldn't have been able to get in. And they advertised that Mantle was going to be in the camp, and I called them up. I said, look, I want to sign up for this camp. It was expensive at the time, and I said, but I'm only coming if Mickey Mantle's there. And he said, Mickey is coming. This will be his first appearance since he got back into baseball. And so I signed up for this fantasy camp. It was Mantle and Ford, Moose Skowron, Willie Mays, Ernie Banks, Yankees and non-Yankees. And I will, just never forget meeting Mickey for the first time. And this was really before the memorabilia industry became very big. And Mickey basically said, look, I'll sign anything except for bats. He was not signing bats, but, foolishly, I only brought like 3 or 4 items. If I had brought 20, he would have signed 20. But he was there, and he was great with the other players, and he would take us out for drinks, and he was out on the field, played as much as he could. And so that was in 1985. And in later years, I got to be with him again at several baseball card shows. One in 1994, I recall, in St. Louis was actually his last show in August of 94, because he died within a year after that. And he came to New Orleans, and I went to New York a few times. So I had the opportunity to get him to sign other items and or to ask him questions about some of the items that I had. So it was just a great experience. And that also helped me write the book, because I was able to put into the book certain stories that nobody knows about and would only know if they had actually talked to Mantle or some of the other baseball players that I've talked to over the years.
Yeah, and incredible stuff getting to be, that close to him. And, it's a different era too. Like, players aren't like that anymore, like those old school guys were. I know you collected cards as a kid. When did you're really focusing on like building a Mantle collection? When did that like really seriously start for you?
Well, I mean, it seriously started when I was 6 years old in 1961. I was a huge Mantle fan. In fact, I still have the original cards that I bought for a nickel back in 61, 62, 63. Again, for those of you who are not old enough, you could not buy a whole set of cards in the 1960s at one time like you can now. You had to wait for each particular series to come out. They'd come out with a series every few weeks or month or so, and you didn't know if you were going to get Mantle at any point in time. But, you get out of school and you go to the local candy store or baseball card shop, and they'd have a vending machine there where you put in your nickel or your dime or your quarter and push it in and pull it out, and then you get a wrapper with 10 cards in it. Or you'd go into the store and you would buy a wax pack for a nickel or 10 cents, and those wax packs are now going for thousands of dollars. And I tell a story in my book. At some point in time, my grandfather used to come over to the house for dinner on Sundays, and he would bring me a box of Topps baseball cards every time he came. That box would cost then about $1.25, and today it's going for $100, $150, $200,000. Foolishly, what I used to do when I got the box was I would make several stacks. I'd pull out all the Yankees. I didn't care who it was. It was Mickey Mantle, great. If it was Hal Reniff, great. And that went in one stack. The next stack was the gum that I would be eating as I opened it. And then the last stack was every other player. And it didn't matter who it was. I didn't care if it was Koufax, Mays, Drysdale, Clemente, or Mike De La Hose. They all went into the third stack. And what I did with my friends was the next day I would tell them, all right, my grandfather, brought me my box of cards. Guys, we lived on a 6th-floor apartment in Brooklyn. I said, come outside after school at 4:00. I'm going to be opening the window and getting rid of some of my cards. And what I would do, foolishly in retrospect, is throw out all the non-Yankees, the Mays, the Koufax, the Drysdales, the Clementes, all of them. And my friends, some of whom were still Giant fans and still Dodger fans, and some crazies who had become Met fans would be running around picking up these cards. So, that was the way it worked with me during the 60s. And that's how I started collecting. And of course, after I graduated law school and was financially able to buy the more expensive items, that's when I picked up a lot of the one-of-a-kind items that I have now. I either got it through auctions or got it directly from relatives of the Mantles or from others who were tied to the Mantles.
Your collection too, Stephen, besides cards, includes awards and personal items. It's an amazing collection. This is probably one of the toughest questions. Is there one item? I mean, when you have so many, it's probably like asking a parent to pick their favorite kid, right? But is there one item to you that just stands out amongst over the rest? I mean, they're all tremendous, but is there one item like that for you?
It's difficult for me because I've got so many. I could probably tell you 2 or 3. I have the very first baseball that Mickey Mantle ever signed, and just coincidentally, I brought it with me, and I hope it shows up on the camera for those of you who are watching. I don't know if you could how well you could see it, but it says
here, you can see it.
It says my first pro win, and then it's signed Mickey Mantle, and then it's dated July 19, 1949, 6-3. And he was, at that time, 18 years old, was playing for the Independence Yankees. And the story behind it is his roommate was a pitcher by the name of Bob Mallon, Mallon. And they were roommates. And one day, Mallon wins a game. And after the game, Mantle and Mallon are in their room. And in walks their manager, Harry Kraft. For those of you who aren't old enough, Harry Kraft was the manager of the Independence Yankees. He also was one of the first managers, if not the first manager, of the Houston Colt 45s in the early 60s. He comes in with this baseball, and he gives it to Bob Mallon because this was Bob Mallon's first pro win as a pitcher. Mantle says to Mallon, flip me the ball. Mallon flips Mantle the ball. Mantle signs it with the date and my first pro win, and he signs the ball. He flips it back to Mallon, and Mallon says, why are you signing my ball? And Mantle goes, because someday I'm going to be famous. And I actually have a disc with the video of the last interview that Bob Mallon gave, in which he tells that exact story about the ball and how he got it. And this ball's been certified on several occasions, and it is the first dated single sign baseball out there. There's no baseball that's dated and single signed earlier than this ball that I have. So that would be one of them. Now, if you go to the other end of Mantle's career, the end of Mantle's career, I have the actual 535th home run ball that he hit. And again, for those that are watching, I don't know if you can make it out, but it says my 535th homer, signed by Mickey Mantle. And again, for those who aren't old enough, the story behind that ball, and this I got directly from the Mantle family, this ball, but the story was that in September 1968, Mantle was at the end of his career. There were rumors that he was going to retire, and he went to Detroit for the next to last series that he was going to be in. The season was about to end, and Denny McLain was pitching for Detroit. Detroit had clinched the pennant. McLain was going to win 30 games that year. He knew it was going to be Mantle's last appearance in Detroit, and so he decided that he was going to let Mantle hit a home run. And at that time, Mantle was tied for third place with Jimmy Fox. They both had 534 home runs. Babe Ruth was first. Willie Mays was second. McLain calls the catcher, and the catcher that day was Jim Price. He calls the catcher out to the mound and tells Price, let Mickey know I'm going to let him hit one. Price goes back behind home plate, and Mantle could overhear what was going on and turns to Price and goes, did I hear him right? Did Denny say he's going to let me hit a home run? And Price says, yeah, he's not going to work you. He's not throwing curveballs, just fastballs down the middle. McLain throws the first pitch. It's a fastball down the middle. Mantle doesn't swing. McLain, looks at him like, what do you want? And Mantle again turns to the catcher and goes, was he really serious? He's going to let me hit one? Mantle didn't trust McLain because McLain was a character, had a reputation as a character. And the catcher said, yeah, he's going to let you hit it. The next pitch is a fastball down the middle. Mantle was over anxious. He fouls it off. The third pitch, again, fastball down the middle. Mantle hits it for a home run. He's running around the bases laughing. McLain is on the mound laughing. Mantle touches home plate. He goes in. He moved into third place right behind Ruth and Mays. Now, what happens next is Joe Pepitone comes up. And Pepitone thinks that McLain is going to let him hit a home run. So Pepitone gets in the box and then signals to McLain by Pepitone puts his hands up around, his neck area, says, this is where I want the pitch to be. And McLain, who had no intention of letting Pepitone hit a home run, basically goes for his head and knocks Pepitone down. So that was the story of homer number 535. Now, Mantle actually legitimately passed the home run record and moved into third place. Actually, a few days later, he went into Boston against Jim Lonborg and hit home run number 536. So that's the story behind that ball. Those are two items that are highly prized in my collection. And the third one that I would say is one of the top three is I own Mickey Mantle's 1963 game-used glove. He was the defending Gold Glove winner at the time. He was defending back-to-back champion at the time in the 63 season. He wore that glove in the 63 World Series. It was the last time he played center field in the World Series. And there were only maybe at most one or two other game-used gloves from Mickey Mantle's prime, which I would consider from 1951 to 1964. That's his prime. I've got the 63 glove. So those would be the top three items. And that glove, again, came right out of Mantle's home in Dallas, Texas, and it's been certified on several occasions.
All right. Sorry about that. We're having like power went out, so my Wi-Fi went off. So um, I'm on a hotspot now with my phone. So I'll edit all this out, so there won't be a gap. I know you were talking about that first ball Mickey Mantle sign. Well, I'm assuming you've kind of finished that thought, and then we'll pick it up
Yeah.
from there.
Now, did everything that I say come out? In
Yeah,
other words,
you're
they
good.
got it.
Yeah, you're good. It's my stuff. I went off the grid. So
Okay,
now,
so well, I'll tell you what I talked about the first ball he signed. I talked about his 535th home run off of Denny McClain, and I talked about the fact that I own his 1963 game-used baseball glove. Those are the three things I talked about.
okay, all right. And then, so like I said, this we're just talking about. I'll edit the video and the audio, so this part will all like magically disappear, and it'll appear seamless. We know what happened, but
That's
to
fine.
someone else, that's the beauty of not being live, is I can kind of clean it all up. So I'm gonna start now, Stephen, as if nothing ever happened and no one's worse for the wear. So
Not a problem.
all right, so literally that ball is the first one that Mantle had ever signed. I mean, the historical significance of that. I don't need to tell you that. I mean, just not that it's about value, but I mean, just talk about the significance of the ball and everything surrounding it.
Well, I mean, just think, and again, the value to me is not the monetary value, although it does have significant monetary value. The value to me is the fact that it's the first ball he ever signed. It's something with his actual DNA on it, and it's historical. It's a museum piece. It's one of a kind. Think of all the hundreds of thousands of baseballs that are out there that Mickey Mantle signed, and this is the first one. So, I don't know what it's worth. I have no clue. And someday, I guess it'll go up for auction. But for now, it's in a safe place. And I'm just like I'm the custodian. Bob Mallon was the first custodian. I'm the second custodian. Somebody will be the third custodian.
Now you have an incredible collection. How often? I mean, people do know, of things you own. How often does somebody try to obtain or purchase an item from you?
All the time, all the time. I have several individuals whose names are Steve, and they know I have stuff from Mantle signed to Steve, as well as other items. I have Roger Maris items, I have Derek Jeter items, signed to Steve. And there are several people named Steve that contact me, I would say definitely on a monthly basis. Are you ready to sell? Are you thinking of selling? Do you have anything to sell? And I just tell them at some point in time I will, but just not now. There are other people who have my book and have found pieces in there that they want. I've had several people. I have a really unique a Mantle family Christmas card. It's in the book. It's a pop-up home. It's Mantle's home, and it's the card that they would send to people. And I also have, I don't know if it's one of a kind, but it's pretty rare, a signed piece from Mantle to Santa Claus, wishing him a Merry Christmas, that kind of goes along with the house. And I have people that have wanted that. And there are other items that people want, but they're not necessarily at the point where they can pay the price for the stuff.
Yeah, that's incredible, and they'll have to wait till it's time. You mentioned some autos. How many different Mantle autos are in the Stephen Lane collection? Do you have an exact number?
I don't have that many. I made sure that anything I either purchased or that I got Mickey to sign was unique. Maybe I have a dozen to 20 on baseballs, on some one-of-a-kind photographs, on some bats. And the one thing that is the most unique, is I have a giant, and when I say giant, I mean a giant. For those of you who can't see, that aren't watching this, they're only doing the audio, I'd say 2 feet by 2 feet, a giant jockstrap that Mickey Mantle signed in the early 1960s that I obtained. And Mantle, he came to a card show in New Orleans, and I knew the promoter who was running the show. And I said, look, I've got to ask Mickey about this jockstrap. And number one, I wanted to know if it was his signature. And number two, what were the circumstances? I said, I don't want to embarrass him. I don't want to do it in front of other people. Just get me in a back room with him before or after the show so I could ask him. And I got that opportunity. And I did. I opened up this giant jockstrap. On one side of the jockstrap is the name, address, and phone number of a New York City restaurant. And on the other side of the jockstrap was the menu with the prices. Now, just to give you an example of how long ago this was, and I don't recall the exact price, but a steak cost like $5.25. Okay, so we're talking late 50s, early 60s. And it was Al Schacht's restaurant. Again, for those who aren't old enough, Al Schacht was the original clown prince of baseball. He would go from stadium to stadium dressed like a clown, put on a show. For those of you who have watched Bull Durham, at the very beginning of that movie, you see Max Patkin, who was then the clown prince of baseball. Well, Al Schacht taught Max Patkin what to do. So this was Al Schacht's restaurant, has the menu on one side, the address, phone number on the other. And I said to I said, Mickey, can you just tell me the circumstances on, that you signed this jockstrap? And he says, I don't know if I can use all of the exact language, but the bottom line was that he felt the owner had substantial testicles to charge the prices that he was charging, and that he needed to have a jockstrap that was big enough for those testicles. Okay. That was Mickey's story.
That's funny, and that goes to show you he had a sense of humor, and knows that you hear stories about him. He definitely, had fun and had a sense of humor, and that sort of thing. I think I know the answer to this question. I got to ask it anyway. They're still making like new versions of Mantle cards in some products. Not so much recently, but in recent years. I'm assuming that's probably not something you necessarily go after or collect. You're looking. You're more focused on his playing days. Would that be accurate?
Right. And I've got every one of his cards. I've got them all from the 51 Burke Ross or 51 Bowman, all the way to the end, to the 69 tops. And that's what I collected. And that's what I like. I know now that people are collecting the ones with the uniform patches or a piece of the bat. And I understand that. And, if you can't pay $12 million for a 52 tops and you want to have a piece of Mickey, piece of his uniform, piece of his bat, that's fine. The problem that I have as a collector is they're producing so many of these cards that my concern is that you're going to get to a point where it's just going to drop the bottom out of the market on some of the stuff, which is what happened in the past when they overproduced cards. And, I know that there are collectors out there just trying to get into it, some doing it for investment purposes, some doing it because they get hooked on a young player immediately. And my concern for them, again, is not to spend too much money on a young player, because you never know what's going to happen, whether it's an injury, whether it's drug use, whether it's something else that ruins their career or eliminates them from their Hall of Fame chances. And all of a sudden, a card that you paid $500 for, $1,000 for, $10,000 for becomes worthless, which is what happened to guys like Dwight Gooden or Darryl Strawberry, or those players in the 80s and then in the 90s, where people were sure that Gooden and Strawberry would go into the Hall of Fame. and it just didn't happen. A lot of people lost money. So you just have to be careful in what you buy. And as regards Mickey, I mean, his cards are always going to have good value one way or the other. But in terms of what I collect, I'm sticking with the old stuff that I got, from day one.
You brought up a topic that I kind of want to segue into a question. I'm a Jackie Robinson guy, also from Brooklyn. He passed away a month before my birth, but my dad basically lived at Ebbets Field. So I got all the stories through my dad and became a Jackie Robinson fan of the person, not just the player, but the person and the whole total package. As someone who, I do own, you mentioned memorabilia cards where they take a piece of a jersey or a piece of a bat and they make a game use and they make a card of it. I own some of those Jackie Robinson type cards, and I'm sort of, it's sort of bittersweet. It's like a tug of war in my mind. While I'm glad I get to own a small piece of history, the other part of me says, Stephen, like, they had to destroy an intact bat. They had to cut up a jersey to make these cards. And for that, I sort of feel bad. So it's a tug of war in my mind that this is a piece that could be on display, whether it be in someone's personal collection or at the Hall of Fame itself. And to have the card that I do, a piece of baseball history had to be basically, in a sense, destroyed in some form or fashion. When it comes, and Mantle obviously has similar cards like that. What's your feeling as a Mantle collector when you see that? Do you have any strong feelings like that?
Well, I look at it from three different perspectives. From the collector's perspective, you have those collectors, like I said, who can't afford a uniform, who can't afford a bat, which is probably 95 to 99% of the collectors out there, and at least it gives them an opportunity, such as yourself, to have a piece of Jackie Robinson or a piece of Mickey Mantle or a piece of Willie Mays or whoever, and be able to look at that and know again that Jackie touched it. It was on him. It's got his DNA on it. So I understand that perspective. At the same time, I understand the perspective of the purist or somebody who could buy the uniform, but for the fact that it's been cut up and maybe is frustrated now because once you cut up a uniform or a bat, it makes all the other uniforms and bats even more valuable or more expensive because there's less uniforms and less bats. So, it cuts both ways. I don't think there's a right and a wrong. I think that there are multiple perspectives, and I can respect both sides of the argument.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm going to actually talk a little bit about a Mantle item that I own. I'm assuming you're probably aware of it. Recently, Rally, a fractionals company, purchased Mantle's boyhood home in Commerce, Oklahoma. I know some folks with the company. I did a little piece on it. I wrote an article for Sports Collectors Digest, and then they took a part of the barn, the metal, the sheet metal that fell off, and they actually made cards. I happen to have one here. I've shared this before on my social medias. So this is a Mantle card with part of the barn that him and his grandfather basically practiced baseball against. So twofold, I guess. Your thoughts on is that something that's of interest to you? And your thoughts on them now. I own the funny story is I own 7 shares of Mickey Mantle's boyhood home. That's not by accident. When the number 7. So I bought 7 shares. They were nice enough, just from knowing them and doing some work and highlighting them. They sent this particular piece. Your thoughts on those kind of things when you see them?
Sure. Well, I've got a history with the Mantle home, coincidentally. I've been to the home on several occasions. You will find my name inside the barn on the date of my 65th birthday. I traveled to Commerce, Oklahoma, through Oklahoma City, made the ride to the home. I tried to get into the home and I contacted them in advance, but there, at the time, there was only one person in all of Oklahoma who had the key to the home, and she was out of town. So I couldn't get into the home, but I did go around, get into the barn, and that's where I spent my 65th birthday. Friends of mine think I'm absolutely crazy to be spending my 65th birthday in Commerce, Oklahoma, but it was worth every second of it. That's number one. So I've got a history there. Number two, when they did come up with this arrangement to sell shares, I was contacted originally because somebody must have had my book and asked me if I would be interested in making a substantial purchase of shares from the home. And I thought about it and discussed it with my financial people, my CPA, and I just couldn't figure out a way to rationalize it other than owning, 10 or 20 or whatever it was percent of the home, because I don't know what to do with that home. They've tried to move it. I know people who I know a gentleman, I don't know if you know him, a gentleman by the name of Tom Catal, Catal, was actually Mantle's agent and friend who did his first baseball card show with him, who wanted to own the home and uproot it and move it to Las Vegas and create a museum. And they couldn't do it. I know the town tried to get up funds to turn it into a museum. And they may be trying to do that now. And in fact, the current majority owners have contacted me in the past and asked me if there's a way to put some of my items in the home. And I said I might be willing to do that depending upon what the plan was and that it was insured and secure and whatever. So there's a possibility about that. And I have to admit, I did try to get one of those cards with the piece, but by the time I tried to get them, they were all sold out. So, if I come across one at the National or whatever at a baseball card show, I might pick one of those up. That might be the one card that I try to pick up. But that's a good piece to have, as well as being able to say that you own a piece of Mickey's home. It's a great thing to say. Hopefully it'll go up in value.
I remember when I bought the 7 shares, Stephen, I went on my Facebook page, and that in the grand scope of things, that's 0.0014% of all the shares. It's a blip on the radar, if even that. But I joked, I went on my social media and I posted, tongue in cheek, like, you're looking at the new part owner of Mickey Mantle's boyhood home. Then I let people in on how small of a percentage, but I had a little fun, initially with it. There is talk. One of the nice things about owning even very little shares at 7 is all the shareholders get to vote kind of on the future of the property. And you did touch on this, and you sort of answered the question, but I'll bring it back up too. Is there's talk about making it a museum? That would be if it was left up to me. I think it should. I can't see anybody like just living in the house. I think it should be turned into a museum. And then before you even mentioned it, that was one of my questions. I was going to ask you if that's the route they went. Would you be willing to, loan a few pieces from your own personal collection if it was becoming a museum? You sort of answered that. I agree with you. You definitely have to have security measures in place to protect your property and things on loan, and obviously insurance and to cover, God forbid, a loss or natural disaster even. It is in the Midwest, and we know tornadoes and the likes can happen. So I mean, just if you want, I don't know if you want to elaborate any further, but that would be something I want to see the house turn into a museum. And I think it would be awesome with your incredible collection. Obviously not the whole thing, but maybe a few things can be on display there.
Oh yeah, no, I would be interested in that. I've loaned some of my items out to the New York Yankees. They've shown my items in the Yankee Museum at Yankee Stadium, and I'm always willing to share, which is why I did the book, because I just wanted to share the things that I have with others. To me, though, especially when you talk about real estate or something like this house, it's the old what they say: location, location, location. If this house was located in a major city, whether even if it was Oklahoma City, you would get the foot traffic from tourists or locals that you just can't get in Commerce. For those who haven't been to Mantle's house, it is literally in the middle of nowhere. When I went and visited the house and I had my Netscape navigator on my phone, it still couldn't locate the home and the exact street that it was on. I had to drive around until I actually saw a house that I thought looked like it, and then realized what it was because I saw the plaque on the outside. So, it's going to be, you might have a tough time getting people to drive to Commerce, but if you're a Mantle fan, if you're a baseball historian, Yankee fan, it is worth the trip, just for the photo opportunity, because you do have the barn, and you can see the marks where Mickey's father and grandfather were throwing the baseball, one left-handed, one right-handed, so he could learn how to switch hit. You see the marks are still there along that barn, and it's a piece of baseball history. He's the greatest switch hitter in baseball history. Some would say, the greatest Yankee. Some would say, but for his physical problems, would have been the greatest all-around player, and I believe was the greatest all-around player in his prime.
Yeah, no doubt. And you're right with the location, but like you made the trek being a Mantle guy. I think it's sort of like Field of Dreams, right? If you build it, they will come. Will it get the same? I mean, Cooperstown's in the Cooperstown, the Baseball Hall of Fame Museum is in a very small town, about 65 minutes from me here in Syracuse now. And people, millions of people have went. So I think, it's ideally it's not in the central location, but I think some real baseball fans, historians, like you said, and people who sort of want to honor and pay their respects to arguably, well, not arguably, the greatest switch hitter and arguably one of the greatest baseball players of all time. I think people will find a way to get there. I'd like to see it. Speaking of museum, I mean, that was another question that I had for you. Have you yourself, with the insane collection that you yourself have you ever thought about maybe starting a museum or where people can come through and sort of see it up close and personal? As we're talking about Endgame, right? And has that thought ever crossed your mind?
No, what I have done, I've sent the Yankees, various people on the Yankees, a free copy of my book. In fact, I went to high school and played junior high baseball with the president of the Yankees, Randy Levine, and I sent them my book, and I just told them, I said, go through the book, whatever you want me to loan you, I'm happy to loan you. So all they have to do is call me, because they have, a million people going through Yankee Stadium, not a million, like 2 or 3 million going through Yankee Stadium in any given season. So if I wanted to share it with people, that to me would be the way and the place to share it. And I do agree with you, listening to what you said, because I've been to Cooperstown, and what I've had to do is fly. I live in New Orleans. I've had to fly into Kennedy Airport and then rent a car and drive from Kennedy Airport to Cooperstown, which is a horrendous drive. Whereas if you fly into Oklahoma City, it's not that bad a drive going from Oklahoma City to Commerce. You just got to get, go to Oklahoma City. So you are right in that respect. If you want to see Mickey's home, you can get there. And you can go to Mickey Mantle's restaurant, which is also in Oklahoma City. Great steak restaurant that I was at when I visited Commerce. And see, they have memorabilia of Mantle's there too.
Well, I even think of, the Field of Dreams house that was in the movie, and the field in Dyersville, Iowa, I believe. And people go there, and that's really off the beaten path. And you can rent a house with a group of people and stay there overnight. you can play on the field, and that's a fictional place. I mean, that was made for a movie. That wasn't really Shoeless Joe. That was Ray
Right.
Liotta playing
Right.
Shoeless Joe.
Right.
With the Mantle House, this is the real McCoy. There's nothing fictional about it. It might feel fictional because it's just so amazing, but it's a real place. So if people, and I don't mean disrespect to the Field of Dreams house, but if people are traveling there, I think they would find a way to get to Commerce, Oklahoma, and any way they could to sort of pay their respects to arguably one of the greats of not just baseball but of sports, an icon of sport.
No, I agree with you. And I've seen, when I've been out to the house, I've seen parents take their kids out there and have a catch, or even hit against the barn, as long as you're using a wiffle ball or something and not a hard ball. It's going to break a window. Which is, it's amazing that Mantle didn't, in any of the books you read about, or when I talked to him, he never broke any windows. It was always going over the roof. So, but yeah, get out there and play with your kid right there where Mickey Mantle played,
Yeah, an incredible moment, right? Something that's probably on a lot of people's bucket list and that sort of thing. I got to ask you, your collection's incredible. I don't know if you want to share this, if you have something and you want to keep it on the down low, but one of the questions is there something that you don't have that you're in pursuit of at this point, or no?
There's nothing. It's funny. Every year I go to the National, and like everybody else, or at least some of the big dealers, you bring significant amounts of cash with you. And every year I go, I'm not really looking for anything, but I always find something that I don't need, but that I have to have. And I'll tell you another story that's in the book. I don't know if you know a gentleman by the name of John Tobby. He's like the nationwide bat expert. He's the one that does all the reports on whether or not a bat is legitimately game used by a particular player. And it was through him that I obtained my 1963 Mickey Mantle game used glove. Well, fast forward 2 or 3 years later, and he knows that I'm a Mantle collector. And I was at the National, not really looking for anything in particular. And he says, Steve, I have the 1962 All-Star bat that Mickey Mantle used. Would you be interested? Because every year they would give the players 2 bats to use in the All-Star games. Somebody else owns the other one. In fact, it's up for sale now. I think it's up to like $150,000 or something. It's being auctioned off right now. And I said to him, well, how much? And he gave me a price. I'm not going to tell you the price, but he gave me a price. And I said, well, that's a little high, John. And he says, well, what if you buy the bat, I will get the current owner of the bat to come to Cleveland, which is where the National was that year. Come to Cleveland, take a picture of you with the bat, and he'll sign the picture after the picture's developed, and he'll send you a letter, confirming how he got the bat, blah, blah, blah. I said, John, why would I care who the owner of the bat is? And he says, well, the owner of the bat is Reggie Jackson. And I said, oh, well, will that be cash or credit card? And, I bought the bat. I wasn't looking for the bat. I didn't go to the National looking for a bat. I got Mantle's 1953 bat. I wasn't looking for a 62 bat, but once he said, Reggie will hand it to you, Mantle gave it to Reggie, and Reggie will sell it to you. I said, fine. And, Reggie came to Cleveland, took a photo with me, signed the photo, sent me a letter on Mr. October stationery, and, that's all part of the book. But that's an example of there's something out there that I don't have. I don't know what it is. I haven't seen it yet, but somebody will show it to me and I'll end up buying it. I'll tell you one more story because I have another item here that, again, I wasn't looking for. But again, somebody asked me if I was interested in this. And if you're not watching, if you're just listening, this is the very first batting trophy that Mickey Mantle ever won. It says Mickey Mantle, Western Association batting champion, 1950. He won that a year before he was on the Yankees. What happened was he won the batting title for the Western Association, hit 383. And as a result of winning that title, the Yankees called him up to Yankee Stadium in September of 1950. He never played in a game. You won't, see it listed any place that he was even on the team. He sat on the bench, and it was as a result of that trophy that he first got into Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, that's an incredible piece. I remember reading about that. Obviously, in the book, there's only going to be one of those, right? When there a lot of these things, Stephen, obviously there's only one that's ever going to exist. It's a true one of a kind item, and just amazing. Kind of coming down the home stretch, like you talked about. Eventually, maybe a lot will see the auction block to live on in someone else's collection. When do you determine like that time is? How do you even know as the owner, as the current owner?
Well, I mean, I've already been in talks with Heritage Auctions, who sold the $12.6 million Topps card, 52 Topps card, and I've known them for some period of time. And I told them, come up with a plan. Come up with a plan. I would like to sell some items in memory of the 30th anniversary of Mickey's passing, which will be in 2025. He passed away in 1995. So the 30th anniversary, to remember him, I'm certainly going to be selling certain of the items, and some of them may be the bigger items. Maybe the first signed baseball, maybe his game used glove. I've got one of his most valuable player awards and other one of a kind items that, can't take it with me. So might as well offer it to others. But I would say starting by 1995, you're going to be seeing some things coming up for auction. I would, if my daughter had an interest, which is another story. My daughter is now 34, and I raised her to be a Yankee fan. We lived in New Orleans, but I raised her to be a Yankee fan. Well, she got into Boston University undergrad and has been living in Boston ever since, which is the last 10 or 15 years. And I didn't expect her to show up at Fenway Park every game wearing Yankee paraphernalia and get beers poured on her and get into fights with people. And on her own, she became a Red Sox fan. I have not disinherited her. I have not cut her off. I haven't blocked her on my Facebook account. And when we go to games, she wears her Red Sox stuff. I wear my Yankee stuff. And just thank God the Red Sox finished behind the Yankees last year. Otherwise, I would have had to put up with a lot of grief if the Yankees finished in last place. But she doesn't want my Yankee. She doesn't want my Yankee stuff. The only thing she does want, I have one piece. It is the original architect drawings from the original Yankee Stadium. It's a really nice big frame piece. It's in the book. That's the only piece she has asked for. So that's the only piece I will not auction, which is a whole other story. I don't know if you have time for it or not, but it's a whole other story how I got that piece.
Yeah, if you want to kind of, we'll close with that. Yeah, I know the story from reading the book, but it is a tremendous story. Go ahead if you want to.
I was a lawyer in a law firm in New Orleans. Somehow, one of our clients was the president of the demolition company that demolished the inside of Yankee Stadium in 1973, when they did the first renovation, when Steinbrenner took over. fast forward, I don't know, 20 years, he was in the office and they introduced him to me, and I told him I was a Yankee fan. In fact, I had some of my Mantle stuff in the office. He didn't know I was from New York. And he said, look, if you're ever in New York, come by my warehouse. You could take whatever you want. Well, within about 2 months, I was back in New York visiting my mother. We drove out to the very tip of Suffolk County. If we had driven any further, we would have been in the Atlantic Ocean. He was right on the tip, this huge warehouse with all types of things that the Yankees just didn't care about. I mean, giant oil paintings of Dan Topping and Del Webb, who were the owners of the Yankees in the 50s and 60s. He had boxes and boxes of untouched yearbooks from the 1970s and all kinds of other stuff. He said, take what you want. So I saw these architect drawings, and that was one of the things that I took. Unfortunately, my mother and I drove out to his warehouse in her Toyota Tercel and not in a U-Haul truck, which is what I should have brought if I hadn't been, so naive. But I got enough stuff. It was worth the trip. I got enough stuff, and it's all in the book. But that's how I got the original architect drawings.
Yeah, and an incredible piece of history there in themselves, and obviously, like you said, they'll live on with your daughter eventually having them in her possession. So just incredible. For those listening, get the book. Whether you're a Yankee fan, not a Yankee fan, a Mickey Mantle fan, or just a huge baseball fan, I tell you what, I read it in like less than 2 days. I just couldn't put it down. I said, I'm going to read, 10 pages, and 10 pages became 30 pages, and went right through it just because it was so enthralling. And to see, from even Mickey Mantle's stuff when he was in elementary school and a yearbook, and to look at that young face and not know, what the legend he was going to eventually become. Just stuff like that you can't get just anywhere. And it's in your book, and you did an incredible job sharing your collection. And kudos for sharing. Sometimes people aren't so forthcoming with, what they own or don't want to share it or put it out there. So kudos to you, Stephen, for being so welcoming and sharing that collection, which is a time capsule of history in a sense as well, of sports. So not just baseball, but sports as well. So give out where people can acquire the book, and anywhere you want to kind of steer them to.
Sure.
Take as much time as you need.
For those of you watching, like John said, here's the book. You can see it. If you're not watching, you can get the book either 2 ways. I've limited it. It's for sale at the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. They're selling the book, or you can get it from me directly. Just write to me at S Lane. That's SLANE mail, MAIL, all one word. S Lane mail 77, the number 77 at gmail.com. So slane mail 77 at gmail.com. It's going for $30 total. That includes shipping and handling. And if you want me to inscribe it to you, or to your spouse or to your child or whatever, just let me know and I'll be happy to inscribe it.
Well, awesome stuff, Stephen. Awesome collection. Thank you for sharing some of that today on the podcast and on the YouTube. If you're going to the Cleveland National, you mentioned the Cleveland National, which is where it is this year here in 2024. If you're planning to attend, I hope to obviously meet you in person, shake your hand as well, and hope to see you there.
And I look forward to that. I am going to Cleveland. And also, one other thing, Heritage will be showing some of my items, not for sale yet, but they will be showing some of my items. So if people are interested in Mantle items, just seeing them up close, they'll have some of this stuff in Cleveland.
So you either get the book, see it there, and then come to Cleveland and see it live in the flesh, as they say. Well, Stephen, thank you. Take care, and we'll. I look forward to meeting you, and good luck in the future as well.
Thank you, John. Thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate it. It was an honor to be asked to be on.
Thank you.